Well, since you watch our show, I suppose that I need to warn you that according to some recent news articles, you are watching a show hosted by a hateful bigot. And that was about the nicest thing that was said about me. Here's what happened. I recently spoke at the National Religious Broadcasters meeting out in Anaheim, California. I was interviewed by the Christian Post, and they asked me what I believed was the biggest threat facing our culture. So I replied that I thought it was the abandonment of the biblical standards of family. The view that there is no such thing as maleness or femaleness anymore, and that marriage doesn't really matter, and divorce is no big deal, and that any form of marriage is equally valid, not just between a male and a female. I also said that it's that fathers don't seem to be that important to the development of a child, that gender is fluid, and that we can just choose a gender based on how we feel rather than how we were created. And that the Bible is some old book that no longer represents our changing culture, and it often fails to be on the right side of history. So since that article, virtually every left-wing publication in the country has blasted me for what they called homophobic and anti-LGBTQ hate. Now, most fail to point out that I said nothing about LGBTQ anything. My main point was that the reason for so much cultural confusion and moral decadence was the Christian church. Too many modern churches have decided to preach a gospel that just doesn't offend anyone by basically saying, just do whatever you feel about. And so we have ignored or maybe dismissed biblical standards so that we can be modern, relevant, in touch, hip, and relatable. I mean, surely God would never want us to hurt someone's feelings or disagree with their beliefs. And look, I want to be very clear. I don't think God wants us to be obnoxious, judgmental, hateful, or self-righteous. But without apology, I do believe God has created the standard. And we need to challenge our culture to tune itself to God's truth rather than demand that God tune himself to my truth and our culture. So, as a musician, here's something I absolutely know. Before I can play a piece of music, I must first tune the instrument to the musical standard. And whether the standard is a tuning fork, a well-tuned piano, or an electronic tuning device, even the most virtuoso musician will only make noise if his or her instrument isn't tuned to a fixed, absolute note on the musical scale. Look, I didn't make the rules. If there is indeed a God, and I believe there is, then he creates the rules since, hey, he created the game. Now, my job as a human is not to persuade him to agree with my behavior or standards, but is to change my behavior to his standards. I want to be very clear. I don't hate anybody. I really don't. But I refuse to ignore or deny God's law or natural law. And if I fail to tune my life to those standards, how can I hope to make music of my life? When every instrument of the band plays according to its own standard of tuning, the result? Chaos and noise. The instruments are not the same in tone or volume or sound, but they do join together to make music only if they agree on the tuning device. Hey, you're free to live the life you wish to live, but you are not free to tune your life to what you feel, believe, or think instead of a standard that God has created, because otherwise you'll end up with a result that is anything but beautiful. Now, if that makes me a hateful bigot, then it's because those who label me that are tuned to a different standard. So with no apology, I'll do my best to tune my life and beliefs to God's unchanging standard rather than to ask him if he could rewrite the Bible and tune his standards to me. That's my view.